He was too attractive for my wife to resist, and to be honest, she didn't seem to care. She happily danced with Mark, and after a few minutes she looked at me, waved and smiled, then walked off in the direction of the bathroom. Thanks to her, him and that fool, I ended up on the dance floor with her instead of dancing myself. This was the moment when my plans went awry. I felt rage wash over me, turned sharply on my heel, and quickly walked back to our table. As soon as I approached, the conversation stopped abruptly and everyone turned away. Everyone clearly knew what was going on. I became an object of ridicule in front of everyone because of this idiot and my own wife. "Hi James, how are you?" Sam asked cautiously as he helped his wife, Katie, to sit down at the table. I wanted to blurt out something along the lines of how his wife had been rude to him yesterday, but the words wouldn't come. I still haven't gotten over my good guy self, looks like I've had to work on it. Well, I guess it depends on what you consider okay, I snapped, causing a few nervous chuckles around me. Yeah, it was horrible, but you two will work it out, okay? You're not seriously considering breaking up with Lori over this, are you? Sam asked. I leaned back in my chair and looked around. There were many beautiful women in the room. Of all these people, why did my wife choose Mark? What made her agree to this? Why did she just push me away? Our children were getting older and more independent every day. Soon they will leave the house. Lori and I even discussed what we would do when that moment came. But now I felt my heart sink with the realization that maybe Lori hadn't even thought of me in her future plans. I was the biggest idiot. Anger swept through my body in a wave, displacing all the longing and disappointment. Everyone at the table noticed how my face had changed. They must have wondered if I would snap and do something stupid. "James, how are you?" Katie asked in a shaky voice, looking over her shoulder at me. Four very attractive young women were sitting at a table near the dance floor and I noticed them. Why didn't Mark pursue one of them? I looked at them for a long time, until suddenly I began to shake with laughter. The people at our table shuddered in surprise, and soon my laughter attracted the attention of everyone around me. I laughed so hard that tears rolled down my cheeks. When I finally calmed down, I smiled at everyone around me and wiped away the tears. At that moment, I realized that everything had changed. I was freed from my duty to be faithful because it became clear that my wife did not care about my feelings. I removed the engagement ring and placed it directly in Katie's open hand. Everyone around was amazed. "When you see Lori, give her this," I said. "I have other things to do." I stood up and said, "That's my drink," and threw a $10 bill on the table. "Since you all supported Lori in her betrayal like this, you can cover the rest of the bill yourself." Returning, I felt a wave of pride, ignoring the cold stares and whispers of people who were once my friends. As I was leaving the club, I thought for a moment about what I would say if someone tried to stop me. The only thing I knew for sure was that I would break the nose of any man who dared to approach and didn't back down. My thoughts were racing like crazy. If Lori is out there having fun spitting on my soul, I won't be in debt either. As soon as I arrived at the hotel, I went to the counter and asked the girl working at the reception if there were any suites available. She declined, but after mentioning that the bridal suite was still available, offered it if I needed more space. Then she began to list all the amenities of this room. "I'll take it," I answered. "I'm sorry, but it's too late to upgrade your current number," she explained. "No problem," I said. "I will stay in this suite, and I will save one room for my wife." The girl looked at me like I was doing something nice for Lori, and I could see her surprise. She gave me a map from the room and indicated how to get there. I just winked. "And one more thing," I added. "If my wife comes here and asks for the key, don't give it to her. Please make sure no one tells her I'm staying at the hotel if she asks." She looked a little confused, but I didn't bother to explain. I made sure the hotel staff understood my request, then went back to my old room, packed my things, and threw Lori's things in the trash without any regrets. They meant nothing to me anymore. Then I got in the elevator and went up to the bridal suite on the top floor. The spacious room had a jacuzzi on a large balcony with a panoramic view of the city. I brought one of my best jackets with me just in case. We were planning to visit one of the most prestigious places in the area for evening drinks. I put on my jacket and headed back to the club, stopping at an ATM to withdraw some cash. When I got to the entrance, there was a group of people standing there. I gave the guard a confident nod and confidently headed for the door as if it was my place. He asked if there was anything he could do to help. I smiled and handed him $100. Smiling, he opened the door and beckoned me inside. When I returned to the club, my former friends were still sitting there. I looked around for the 4 beautiful women I had spotted earlier. Fortunately, they were still seated near the dance floor, no man around. It was clearly a bachelorette party, just what I was hoping to find. I moved towards them when suddenly Katie noticed me and started calling and waving. She was saying something, but I couldn't hear what she was saying, and judging by the way the people at their table turned to me, it must have been something unpleasant. I decided to ignore them and continued moving towards the group of women. "Why are such beautiful women sitting here alone?" I asked. The tall brunette laughed and answered. "We're trying to cheer up our friend after her boyfriend left her because of some scumbag." The brunette was clearly drunk. "What is needed?" "I'd love to dance with your friend and make her smile, if you don't mind," I replied, reaching out to help the small red-haired girl off the table. She smiled shyly and let me lead her to the dance floor. "What is your name?" I asked. "Kira." "And you?" She answered. "Alex," I said. "What kind of idiot would dump a beauty like you?" She laughed at my humorous remark. After the song ended, we continued to dance and chat. I found out that she is local and studying to be a nurse. We took another slow dance and danced closer to each other. "Kira, are you married?" I asked after a while. "Alex, earlier I saw how your wife danced with Mark. They disappeared together. Did you notice that?" Everyone in the club seemed to know about it, but what she didn't know yet was that I had figured it out a long time ago. This happened right after our relationship fell apart. The music continued to play and Kira smiled at me as she snuggled closer. It felt so good to hold each other after being betrayed by the people we once loved. After the dance was over we went back to the table and Kira said to her friends, "I know that Alex can stay, but we agreed, no boys today." The brunette was clearly joking when she smiled slyly in my direction. "We played this game together." "No men?" she asked. "How about I bring a few bottles of champagne to make amends?" I joked. She thought for a moment and then smiled widely. "Agreement or not?" she exclaimed. "Mark and his wife have long since left." The other 3 girls began to scream in protest, but eventually gave way to Kira on the bench. "Quick," began the blonde next to me, "what, do you have an open marriage?" "No, it's definitely not about us," I answered. Another blonde added. "So what did she tell you?" Kira was silent. "She just said she was going to the bathroom and then she left with Mark through the back door," she said. The brunette raised her head and exclaimed. "What a vile traitor." My friends covered up her betrayal, as evidenced by the group sitting at the table. I pointed to the table and we continued our conversation. I asked the girls if they liked champagne. At that very moment, the waitress came. Everyone started smiling. I decided to order 2 bottles of the most expensive champagne on the menu. As the drinks began to be served, the girls introduced themselves, Emily, Sarah, and Tina. I also introduced myself as Alex, and met Kira again. All of them were nursing school students. After champagne was served, Tina, a brunette, turned to me with a new question. "And what are you going to do with your wife now?" she asked. "It was all over for me as soon as she walked out that door," I replied. Do you have children? One of the girls asked quietly. Yes, my daughter is 13 and my son is 15, I said regretfully. But, you know, in a few years they will be on their own and will look for better partners for life. Kira almost shouted, hugging me. Well, let her be Greek, this evening is yours. We all raised a toast to that. The girls told me some of their jokes and we laughed together. They occasionally danced with other guys and with each other, but Kira stayed by my side throughout the evening. She wrapped her arm around mine and didn't let go. Toward the end of the evening, Tina suddenly became serious, got up and ran away. Everyone in the room turned their attention to what had happened. Rachel was clearly trying to get closer to me, but Tina stopped her at the table where my former friends were sitting. It was obvious that they were having a heated argument, although we couldn't hear what they were talking about. When Tina started poking her finger in Rachel's chest and yelling in her face, the situation escalated. Rachel cried and sat down, while Tina, still full of anger, turned her anger on the entire table. Her anger caused general satisfaction in the people around her. Emily and Sarah took turns high-fiving her after she returned. Taking a sip of champagne, Tina smiled at me and said, "They will not sit at this table again." I turned to look at their table. Everyone was already going to leave. Chris and Rachel were sobbing and neither of them even looked our way. "How did you find out about this?" I asked Tina. "I let her know how I feel about those who support traitors when I saw she was going to approach you," she replied. "You know how to stir up an anthill," I laughed. They were no doubt hoping that I would forgive Laura to make it easier for them. "I owe you a kiss for that." Kira pulled me closer, said with a smile. "Oh, no, you won't just leave." Before I could get close, the other girls started cheering and Kira gave me a long, passionate kiss. When she finally let go of me, Sarah exclaimed, "You two, go, take off the number." "Well, actually, you girls don't look in any condition to drive," I joked, "and I have a hotel room nearby. If we hurry, we can still order a few bottles of champagne." The four of us, Kira holding tightly to my hand and the other girls clinging to us, balancing on us, headed for the hotel after I paid at the bar. The girls started giggling when they heard the words bridal suite, so I ordered 4 bottles of champagne to keep them entertained. On the way up in the elevator, Kira held on to my hand, even though her cheeks turned bright red when the others began humming a Mendelssohn march. "You have to carry your bride across the threshold," one of the girls joked as we approached the door of the suite. "Kira," I smiled, "you don't have to if you don't want to." She looked up at me with big, shining eyes, but I unlocked the door anyway, picked her up in my arms and carried her into the room. The others laughed as Kira wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me as soon as we were inside. However, the banter quickly subsided when Tina noticed the jacuzzi on the balcony, and soon all 3 were enjoying themselves there. Kira smiled at me as I gently placed her on the floor and she took my hand. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, the delivery service arrived with champagne. The girls were still laughing as we carried the bottles up to the balcony to the hot tub. "You have too many clothes," Lisa joked. "Why don't you undress and join us?" I laughed and promised to stay with Kira. They called for her to join, but all she did was smile, grab my hand and pull me back to the room. When we entered the bedroom, the laughter was still coming from the balcony, and we were already alone. In the morning I woke up with Kira next to me and the rest of the girls lying on the other side of the big bed. Looks like Kira and I just fell asleep together after deciding to rest. I quietly got out of bed and Kira smiled at me. "Alex, how was your night?" she asked. "Just perfect," I replied. "The best night of my life." "Do you regret something?" she asked. "Not a bit," I said and laughed as we continued our time together in the shower. When we left, the other girls were already on their feet, despite the fact that they looked a little drunk. They happily ate breakfast courtesy of room service and sipped mimosas. I can't wait to be in that soul myself. Sounds like the best shower I've ever had, Tina joked, and the girls burst out laughing again. I just smiled looking at Kira. After the shower, the girls gradually packed up and left, leaving me and Kira alone. On the way back to her house, she hugged me and said, "I understand that it was terrible of your wife, but maybe you can still work it out. I would like to see you again. And if not?" She smiled at me with hope in her eyes. "That was great, but I'm not going to live with Lori anymore," I said. "You were exactly what I was missing right now. If you think we can try something more, give us a call." Kira blew me a kiss before leaving, and Tina, who was sitting on the couch, waved and gave me a cheerful smile as I left. As I was leaving, I was suddenly struck by the realization that I had been putting off a decision about Laura. My reaction to her betrayal at the club was impulsive, but it didn't change anything. When I finally got home, in the darkness of the room, I felt that this chaos was starting to help me cope with the situation. I didn't turn on the light, I just collapsed into the chair in the living room, letting my thoughts race through my head, trying to think of a way to end this unhappy marriage without harming the children. A few minutes passed before I heard the familiar click of a key in the door and the sound of a car parking in the yard. "Alex, I'm home," Laura shouted in her usual voice, as she always did after returning from some errands. She went in, closed the door and turned on the light. I just looked at her. She looked the same as last night. The same blue dress that perfectly emphasized her figure. Her face, posture, hairstyle, everything remained unchanged. Even the rings on her fingers were still in place as before. She looked as if she had spent the night with someone else, but there was no trace of shame or guilt on her face. How is that possible? I expected at least some hint of remorse, but there was none. "I'm here," she smiled thinly, adding, "the same Laura." Of course she knew what I was thinking. "Nothing has changed. I still love you as much as I did yesterday," I said without any emotion in my voice, as if it were empty. "I'm glad you feel that way today, Alex," she began, but I cut her off by pointing to the bedroom. "Go take a shower," I said sharply, nodding in the direction of our room. The look on me was emotionless. What else could be said? I kept gesturing her way until she finally left. "Alex, where are my clothes?" she asked when she came back from her shower. "Last night?" "I think he's still at the hotel where you left him," I snapped. "Are my clothes still there?" she asked in surprise. "Yes," I answered. "Did you forget something important?" Laura looked like she was about to start an argument, but suddenly stopped. She realized that if she started, she would have to call me rude, and that would sound silly in this situation. She sighed heavily, and then what I had been waiting for happened for a long time, a confession. "It was Nick," she began. "He is popular, rich and can choose any woman he wants. When he asked me to dance, I agreed. I felt special, the best in the room. He made me feel important." It was as if she was reliving these moments, her face glowing with memories of the previous night. I watched her and knew that this was the end. She will never again appreciate our relationship as much as those brief moments with Nick. I was just an accessory to her, nothing more. "Do you love him?" I asked. "No, I never loved him. It was just a hobby, Alex." "I love you," she continued. "It's just that you and I have different ideas about how to love." She looked at me, sure that she was right. My ego was too fragile to take it. How disgusting that she humiliated me, raising her importance. "I came back because I love you," she repeated. "Did he propose to you? Does he want to marry you?" I asked. Laura hesitated, and then blurted out. "Of course not. Alex, I love you." But what I wanted to know was already evident in her pause. "Laura, you doubted. This is understandable. You would stay with him if he asked." "It was only for one night. It was just flirting," she denied. I interrupted her. I'm tired of hearing that. Only one question came to mind. Pack things and take the children to their parents for a week. You will go with them. This is the end of our conversation. Alex. She tried to deny. No, I answered sharply. If you push any further, you won't like it. Her silence spoke for itself. My cold tone and look silenced Laura. She packed her things, left our house, leaving me alone with my thoughts. When she walked out of my life in the same blue dress that had become a symbol of our past, I knew it was time to act. If I was going to change my life, I needed to do it right. I called my boss and took 2 weeks off. Then I went to the hardware store to buy materials, wood, drywall, paint and 2 new exterior doors. After renting the truck, I went home, grabbed a scrap and got to work. I started by removing the front door along with the windows around it. I installed the new door on the left and left the old one on the right, increasing the entrance area. Then I put up the walls, dividing the house in half right down the middle. I actually turned the house into a duplex. Similar to the original kitchen on the right, I installed a new door on the left that opened into the new kitchen that opened into the living room. I turned the dining room into an extra bedroom and the office into another room on my side. Laura's part of the house looked almost identical to mine, except for the detached garage. No problem, I was planning to build my own. I changed the access code to her garage and installed a new lock. After that, I divided the backyard in half by building a fence. Every day my house became more and more like a duplex. I informed the children that I was busy arranging the house. Laura kept trying to talk to me, but I didn't want to listen to her excuses. In a few days I called her again, maybe this time we can talk more calmly. You haven't forgotten about me? She asked as if nothing had happened. I think about you all the time. Are you taking me to dinner? I answered. No, she answered dryly. I don't cry anymore. I'm not asking you out, Alex. What do you propose? She asked interestedly. A weekend trip, just the 2 of us, I suggested. Really? Her voice revived. Where? We could fly out on Thursday and come back on Tuesday, I suggested with a hint of irony. That sounds great. She said. Can you take this weekend off? She asked enthusiastically. Yes, of course. You only need a passport and a phone. Everything else will be bought on the spot, I lied without remorse, planning the trip. I told her to book the tickets and the hotel. Even if the trip to the Bahamas was going to be expensive, I knew that Laura would still get half of our savings after the divorce. She'll just pay her own share, I thought. After that, I moved all the funds from our joint account to my personal account. And he set up receiving his salary on a new account. I needed the security of the cash because I wasn't sure Laura wouldn't block my credit cards. I worked long shifts, sometimes 16 hours a day, in order to finish installing the walls by Monday. The walls were installed, although not quite finished. I finished Laura's side on Wednesday. I knew sooner or later the gas, electric and water bills would have to be split, but for now she was using the same lines as me. I told Laura to bring the kids home on Wednesday night. The next morning, Thursday, I waited outside for them while I closed up my half of the house. The children got out of the car and looked at the front yard in a daze. My daughter spoke first. She looked at me with wide eyes and asked. What did you do, Dad? I made a duplex out of our house, I answered calmly. How do you like it? They stood in silence, not knowing what to say, with their mouths open, looking at me as if I had done something incredible. Don't worry, I assured. On the right side, I have already moved all your things to the new rooms. Laura was just unpacking her bags when I showed the children the left side of the house. They were shocked by the changes. Then we all sat down in the living room on the right side. Dad, this living room is a lot smaller than the old one, my son Jake pointed out, looking around. Don't worry, I answered. Soon you won't even notice the difference. In addition, I plan to build a garage here and install a pool with a jacuzzi." The children beamed at these words. "Okay, time to unpack," I said, standing up. Noticing Laura giving me a look as if she wanted to talk, I helped the children settle into their new rooms. While we were still unpacking, I brought sandwiches from a local cafe and we all ate lunch together in the kitchen. Emma, my daughter, asked, "Dad, what prompted you to do all this?" I sensed that she was waiting for her mother's reaction. Within days, it became obvious that Emma and Jake sensed something was wrong. They noticed how Laura was avoiding answers. "Soon we'll be empty nesters," I said. "I'm just preparing for the future, because I realize that everything will not remain as it is now." "You could have warned us, Dad," Emma said. "It was our business too, we should have known." "Actually, it was your mother's idea," I said with a sly glance at Laura, who raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Mom, how could you make such a big decision without asking us?" Emma demanded an answer. "Do you even care what we think?" Jake added, glancing at her. Laura started to get nervous, but said nothing. Finally, she said quietly, "I don't know, children." When I realized that Laura took my actions seriously, it became clear that there was no turning back. Laura hurried out of the room looking like she was about to cry. "Why is Mom like this now? Is she crying all the time?" Jake asked. I just shrugged. "Ask her yourself," I advised. Before Emma could develop the subject, I told them I had a trip for a few days, but promised to call every night. After that, I packed my things and left the house without saying goodbye to Laura, who stayed in the bedroom. We went on what turned out to be one of the best weekends of my life. Flying in first class, staying in a 5-star hotel, royal service, everything was wonderful. Sun, beach, delicious food and drinks made every day perfect. Carrie made me feel like I mattered to her. By Tuesday I knew every detail of her beautiful body and we returned home with glowing tans and smiles. When we got to my house, Carrie gave me a soft kiss on the doorstep. "Do you want to stay another night?" she asked, looking at me with a sly smile. "I would like to, but it's time to be responsible." "You have class tomorrow," I joked. "Call me before you go to sleep," she said. "I want to hear your voice before I fall asleep." We shared another kiss and I promised to fulfill her request. I couldn't stop smiling on the way back to the airport. On our last night together, Carrie admitted that she could fall in love with someone like me. When I got home, I saw Laura's car in the driveway. I stopped in front, hoping to avoid an encounter. While I was unpacking, there was a knock at the door. "I'm back," Melanie said as she stood by the door. "Yes, I see," James replied, not looking her in the eye. "Can we talk?" she asked with hope in her voice. "What exactly do you want to talk about?" he asked coldly. "Can I come in?" she tried again, but James just shook his head. "No, you can't come in. This is my space and you're not welcome here right now." "You have your place," he replied dryly. Melanie looked stunned. She stepped back and then slowly walked back to her side of the house, realizing that this wall now separated not only physical space, but also their lives. Later, they sat at the kitchen table on her side. Her voice was strained, "I still love you, James. I want things back to the way they were." "But it won't be," he said firmly, avoiding her gaze. "Why not?" she asked with desperation in her voice. "Because you did things that changed the way I feel about you forever," he replied, his voice heavy with the emotions he was trying to control. "It doesn't have to be like this," Melanie begged, tears already beginning to form on her lashes. "It should," James said quietly but confidently. "I would never do what you did, no matter how good it made you feel. But I still love you," she repeated like a mantra. James was quiet for a moment, letting out a deep sigh as he tried to collect his thoughts. "Imagine we go on a date again like we used to. But this time you leave me alone on the dance floor and go with someone else. Then you spend the night with him and in the morning I don't even know where you were. Do you really think that can you just forget it? He looked at her, waiting for an answer, but he knew there wouldn't be one. It was Nick, she excused herself as if it mattered. But it wasn't me, Melanie. And you chose to be with him, James replied, not allowing himself any more emotion. It was just for one night, she cried, trying to justify herself. But you had a whole marriage to show your love. You dumped me as soon as someone more interesting came along. And now I have to worry about every next actor, athlete, or businessman getting your attention, he asked, but already knew the answer. It's not fair, she whispered. Unfair? James replied with sarcasm. Do you want justice now? Do you want a fair chance to justify what you did? No, Melanie, you lost that chance the night you left me for Nick. She bowed her head, knowing that there were no words that could change the situation. You should take the kids to your parents for a week. Take some of your things and go with them. This is our last discussion, he said emotionlessly as he stood up from the table. James, she shouted, trying to say something, but he cut her off sharply. Don't push me any further, Melanie. You don't want to know what will happen if you do. Melanie paused her speech in the middle, exhaled deeply, shut her mouth, and put her hand down on the table. I had never seen her do anything like that before. In silence, we simply sat there, facing one another. She intended to criticize me harshly and put me in my place for the actions I had taken, but then it dawned on her that she had lost all the power she had in our relationship, which had been based on trust and love, which she had so readily destroyed for one exciting night. At last, Melanie was starting to realize that what she was doing was costing far more than she had anticipated. She undoubtedly believed she was cashing in on a few chips from our years together when she made the decision to sleep with Nick. However, she was beginning to realize that she had taken a huge risk by betting everything. With her hands clasped on the table in front of her, she sat silently. It makes no difference, she muttered. You are still loved by me. Indeed, you say that again and again, I answered. Isn't your love truly extraordinary? After everything you've done, why would I value your love? It's clear that my love for you was meaningless. Why then should I care about yours? However, I do not wish to lose you. What anticipation did you have? You shattered everyone's faith in you and continued to believe that we could just go on. You've been undervaluing me. You are no longer worthy of me. Melanie appeared perplexed. I'm heading home. I have household chores to complete. I'll drop by later so we can eat dinner together with the kids, but please don't bother me until then. I got up and walked out, returning to my side of the house. It was so hard to leave Melanie behind, though I knew deep down that we could never return to that. I still wanted to hold her the way I used to. The Melanie I knew as my wife was dead, never to be seen again. All we had left was a glimpse of what might have been, something that she had disposed of with such reckless abandon, not even regretting it. After showing the kids the new kitchen and explaining my plans to remove the back wall and install glass to overlook the newly installed pool, I brought the kids over to my side of the house. Realizing that this was going to be Dad's side, they both fixed their gazes on the fence that divided the yard. I also gave them a tour of my upcoming rooms. Why will the house be divided into two sections, Dad? Ethan inquired. Since your mother's house will be on the other side and mine will be on this side, I answered. Are you divorcing Mom, Dad? Lily asked. When we ask her questions, she never responds. No, just getting apart. I assumed we could just divide the house since I don't want to be a weekend dad. You two can then determine which side you wish to stick with. Prior to us taking a block walk, Melanie called us in for dinner as she leaned out the front door. We gracefully ate in silence, though obviously under pressure since we knew the kids were beginning to piece together what was happening. All of a sudden, Ethan blurted, I'm going to Dad's side when he's done with my room. Melanie had a horrified expression. James announced you're divorcing. We're not. It's merely miscommunication. It's not even something we've discussed yet, with a quivering voice, she answered. Lily slammed the table with her hand. Who was the cheater? I'm curious to know. Lily and Ethan looked at Melanie, then at me, and then back at her. Melanie gazed at her dish. When she began to cry, the kids knew they had their answer, that I informed them that their mother simply needed some time to herself. After assisting Melanie in getting out of her chair, I led her through the hallway to her room, changed her clothes, put her to bed, and gave her a quick kiss on the forehead the way you would after a bad dream for a kid. I shut the door behind me and turned out the light. I had sympathy for Melanie, similar to how one might feel for an adult child who had committed a horrible crime and was now sentenced to spend the rest of their life in a form of prison. Even though she wouldn't be a significant part of my daily life or even my thoughts, I still loved her. I went into Ethan's room and saw him texting his pals while lying on his bed. I wanted to know if he wanted to discuss everything. Not really, he said, shrugging. I pumped my fist at him and went to Lily's room. Why did she have to do it, Dad? Lily asked, her eyes filled with tears. You'll have to ask her about that, I answered. Why can't you just let her go? She begged me with her question. I would never be able to forgive myself if I did. Lily let out a sigh. I know, but I still want our whole family to be together. Yes, dear. I will not, however, be sharing a room with your mother to sleep in. Before I went back to my side of the house, I gave Lily a hug, and we said our I love yous. That's how things continued to be the same. I kept going to work before the children awoke, thus our morning schedule didn't change. Even now, Melanie and I take turns picking up the kids for sports, band practice, and hangouts on Melanie's side of the family. We also tried to have family dinners whenever we could. She made an attempt once a week or so to discuss the matter, but I would always cut her off and tell her that I wasn't interested. The other significant change took place during school functions. I lost my composure when I sat or stood near her. I would excuse myself to use the restroom and find another place if she came over. When I got back, I was never left alone, though. Eventually, one of the divorced or single women that we knew would come over and naturally inquire as to whether Melanie and I were no longer together. I went all out the next month, buying new furniture, appliances, clothes, and kitchen cabinets to make my side of the house look like a slick bachelor pad. It included an entertainment system, a large TV, and a luxurious convertible. Melanie asked me about our finances when she saw the car. James, is this all really within our budget? That must have been an expensive car, she shouted. My car was 8 years older than yours, Melanie, so yeah, I required a replacement because you were always twice as car buying as I was. I thought I would make up for those years lost. I gave an explanation regarding the remaining new items. You weren't expecting me to live in a vacant house, did you? Not additionally regarding the furniture. By not requesting that you part with any of your prized possessions from my side, I believed I was being considerate. Well, I never liked your taste in furniture anyway, was her reply. That was something you had never said before, I answered. I wanted you to be happy, so I stayed silent. To me, it was not a huge deal. I paused to let that sink in. Forget about the money. My side will be too big for me anyway after the kids move out and the house is paid for. To make extra money, I intend to rent it out, I mentioned. Melanie gave it her all for me tonight. Someone is going to get lucky. She squeezed my shoulder and smiled. I have no complaints. I enjoy your new vehicle, Melanie said. You look great in your new clothes, and you've been working out. I'm grateful, but I can't claim sole credit. Kira assisted me in choosing the new furniture and wardrobe, and Jake and Emma talked me into buying the convertible so they could drive it. When Kira was mentioned, Melanie's hand left my shoulder as her smile vanished. She muttered, I was just wondering, and turned to leave. Though I had no intention of showing off Kira, who had become a major part of my life, I became aware of how much of my thoughts were focused on her. Melanie's emotions, however, were receding even more. Kira was staying at my house more and more, and Jake had moved permanently to my side of the house by this point. Emma, who had previously sided with Melanie, started spending more time with Kira, and before long, Kira was like an awesome older sister to her. Kira soon began spending nearly every weekend and many weeknights at my house. Melanie was polite, but she only expressed concern when I insisted that Kira join us for family dinners. She was clearly not happy about it turning into a regular occurrence. Melanie cornered me on my way to work the following morning. "James, although I'm happy to see you socializing again, would you kindly refrain from taking your girlfriend out to dinner? We should spend that time with the kids as a family," she begged. I said, "Okay, I won't come over for dinner when Kira's around, but the kids can come hang out with us at my house anytime they want." "It's not just like that," she argued. "James, this is the only time we get to spend together as a family. Melanie, actually, Kira plays a significant role in my life now, and I would like to see her in it more. It would be unfair to exclude her because she gets along well with the children." "If her presence bothers you," I retorted, "then you're leaving me out too. James, you always assume that having your way means being fair." "How do I feel, though?" she said. "You probably felt it was appropriate to sneak off with Nick Palmer," she lost her temper. How lightly she thought she could play me was astounding, particularly in light of all that had transpired that night. "You threw fairness out the window, Melanie. Perhaps we should switch to my side for all of our dinners if you don't like it. I'll also allow you to stop by. Kira is a fantastic chef," she said, her eyes filled with tears. "James, I apologize for bringing it up. Kira is welcome to dinner at any time," she whispered, referring to when the jacuzzi and pool would finally be ready. Jake cherished spending time with Samantha, Tina, and Lisa at his house. They were competing to see who could make him blush the most as they shamelessly flirted with him. But the true contest between them was to see who could fit into the smallest swimsuit. Ultimately, Tina was outmatched because she couldn't wear anything overly skimpy without running the risk of a wardrobe malfunction due to her full bust. Nevertheless, she prevailed when she planted a kiss on Jake's chest while they were in the pool. 10 minutes later, Jake was still in the water, even though it was freezing. Jake's life changed in that instant, becoming more confident around women. He soon acquired a girlfriend at school after that. His girlfriend was treated like the luckiest girl in the world, and Samantha, Tina, and Lisa stopped making flirting gestures. Although I never allowed Melanie to visit my side of the house, I didn't want her to interfere with my relationships with Kira and her wonderful friends. However, Kira graduated a few years later, and after dating for a while, we called it quits. Her demeanor started to shift slightly, especially after we went to Lisa's wedding. I understood that, given our age difference, it wouldn't be long before I was expected to step into the role of a sugar daddy. I could see it weighed on her, but it didn't bother me. Not that there were any major issues, our bond was incredible every weekend we spent together. When she mentioned moving in, I got to know most of her family, and we occasionally took trips together with the kids. I even showed her the ring I had planned to propose with. Although flattered, she expressed her desire to experience family life on her own terms. She never brought it up again, though I told her how much I'd love to start another family. I saw it in her eyes, she felt torn. She was meant to be with me, just not at the right moment. Regretfully, I began to feel what many women experience when they're taken for granted, like I was a good man, but still not enough somehow. I gently hinted to Kira that her list of demands was getting longer, and there would be a gap between us, especially when it came to our time in bed. Strong relationships are built on trust, and it's rare to find someone who genuinely embodies it. But just like with Melanie, my success seemed to turn against me. Kira seemed to believe that men like me were replaceable. I reminded her of how things had ended with Melanie and how that had made me feel. Kira's response, "I'd never be that foolish," sealed our fate. Ultimately, I told her that the door would remain open if she ever had second thoughts. Perhaps we'd reconnect when we were older, and the gap in age wouldn't seem so wide. I have no regrets about my time with Kira. At least she had the decency to sit and talk things over with me, unlike Melanie, who had stormed out of a club in silence. I would occasionally run into Melanie's friends, my former friends, and they would always try to persuade me to reconcile with her. They made it sound appealing after hearing their arguments, but what if your spouse had cheated on you? From what I could see, they not only accepted but also endorsed cheating. The fact that we ended up at a club where Nick Palmer regularly hung out didn't seem like a coincidence to me. Of course, my wife was the most beautiful woman there too. Months later, as luck would have it, I learned that the women had moved their girls' night out to a new club where Nick Palmer was known to hang out. Without the wives knowing, Steve's colleague witnessed Rachel dancing with Nick and noted that Nick disappeared shortly after the women left. Around the same time, Steve's friend couldn't recall seeing Rachel leave with the crowd. When the husbands confronted their wives, they all insisted it was a misunderstanding and denied ever being at the club. However, Steve's friend uploaded a photo of himself and his girlfriend at the club a few days later. In the background, Nick Palmer could be seen talking to the wives at their table. Eventually, the truth came out, and they admitted no one left with Nick that night, but something still felt off. When pressed further, none of the women would admit who had been with Nick Palmer, each refusing to throw the others under the bus. But by that time, the damage was already done. After Rachel's name came out, trust within our group was irreparably broken. When the husbands gathered later to discuss everything, Steve provided the clearest summary: how long have they been covering for each other? They lied so easily, right in our faces. Rachel probably had previous flings with Nick or other men too. Every man in that room recalled the look on their wives' faces when Nick Palmer had approached our table that night. They had all heard their wives justify Melanie's actions, pointing out how lucky she was to have had that chance with Nick. After Melanie's first girls' night out, each husband noticed a noticeable shift in their own marriages. A few months later, one guy joked to another, "I'm breaking out in hives from all these silk sheets." They discovered that each of their beds now had brand new white silk sheets. After comparing notes, they figured out through some subtle sleuthing that 4 husbands had all upgraded their beds overnight to white silk. But the tipping point came when every wife started requesting a particular romantic position, cowgirl. And when their husbands complied, with eyes closed and saying nothing, the wives made it clear they wanted control. After Rachel's night with Nick Palmer, none of the husbands could shake the feeling that their wives were fantasizing about him. They believed their wives were replaying their experiences with Nick while lying in bed next to them. Within a year, all 4 couples had filed for divorce. Steve was the first to end things, and he later told me how much he regretted everything that led to their separation. Eventually, all the husbands expressed remorse for not defending me when Melanie betrayed me. One even admitted that, if I had stood up for myself that night, my wife and I might still be together today. Nick Palmer, however, continued to make the mistake of targeting the wrong married women. One night, after leaving a club with yet another fling, a masked man attacked him, throwing him to the ground. Nick screamed in agony as the man shattered both his kneecaps with a hammer and then used a nail gun on his groin. The entire assault was captured on video, but no charges were ever filed. There were simply too many husbands who had both the opportunity and the motivation. Nick Palmer most likely lost both his ability to walk and to urinate normally after that night. As for Melanie, our last meaningful conversation took place when Emma left for college. By that point, we had already finalized our divorce. I was living in a condo near the marina, having rented out my half of the house. After Emma drove off, Melanie lingered in the driveway and asked if we could talk. "I still love you, James. I was foolish, and I've regretted it ever since. I haven't even looked at or dated another man. I know that since Kira, you haven't had any serious relationships. If you wanted to move back in, I'd be thrilled, just to see where things go. She pulled a necklace from under her blouse, on which she had strung the wedding ring I had placed on her finger the day we got married. She held it out to me, hoping for a reply. You still don't understand what went wrong, do you, Melanie? You think that night was about testing my love for you. But in reality, it was always a test of your love for me. But James, she said softly, I truly do love you. I understand that you were in love with the very idea of our marriage, I said. You admired the perfect man, the perfect house, and the perfect children. You loved that I never treated you like a trophy wife or property. We made the big decisions together. You were fascinated by how our relationship remained passionate, even though it wasn't. So often you loved that I always put your feelings first, and you loved that you didn't trust me blindly anymore like before, because now you know that no one else will bring you the same happiness as me. Kira picked up the necklace, her hand shaking slightly from the tight grip. You never realized what you had, and now it's gone. I won't be there for you anymore. And I won't let you hurt me like you did then again. I thought we were a solid couple, but that night, when you went to Nick Palmer, you ruined everything. Kira's face began to fill with tears. I was with Nick Palmer. How many times do I have to apologize for this, she cried. It was never about Nick Palmer, Kira. You felt lucky when he asked you to go out with him that night. But really, I was the lucky one. When I was convinced I was overreacting, I realized, you were the reason why we weren't a great couple. My love was too strong, that's why you left. My love was the rhythm of our life, that defined us. I saw Emma across the room as I sat at that table in a rage. She looked at me with pity for my situation, but smiled when I smiled back at her. Her charming smile reminded me that I am still human and that I can find happiness in other relationships. That night you set me free and opened my eyes. With that thought, I got into my convertible and drove home with a smile. Kira recently moved in with me after leaving her job in another city. She has been great since she came back into my life. It's great to have trust. And now I understand that our marriage was based on something other than Kira's love. I possessed this power. When Kira finally woke up, since her late-night walk seemed completely out of character, I decided to question her about it. Good things don't usually happen in the middle of the night, I said, trying to make sense of her behavior. She refused to tell me who she was with, and it became clear that she was making things up as she went along. Later, she told me that she had confided a little too much in a coworker about how unhappy she was in our relationship and that she felt obligated to talk to me about it. This guy supposedly offered to kiss her as he walked her home, but she claimed she had turned him down. She insisted this was the truth, but by this point, my faith in her words was shattered. Over the next few weeks, every time I brought up the story, she would change details, altering how things supposedly played out. None of it made sense to me unless something more had happened. I couldn't let it go. Then, one day, she told me she had given her 2 weeks' notice at work. That's when I knew something serious had gone wrong, something she wasn't ready to admit. But one evening, after I took her phone and looked through it right in front of her, she finally broke down. She admitted to me, after running out of excuses, that there had indeed been more than she'd originally let on. After that, Kira tried to backtrack. She insisted that she hadn't really cheated, that it wasn't what I thought. But by then, it was too late. You don't admit to something like that unless there's some truth to it. It became clear this wasn't just a one-time mistake, but a full-blown affair. I may never know the full story or how long it lasted. Part of me feels like I have to accept what she told me, but I can't help wondering what else might have happened that she never admitted. To give you some background, our relationship had been far from conventional. Of the 7 years we were together, we spent 4 apart, living in different cities. There were stretches where we didn't see each other for long periods of time, but we always made an effort to visit whenever possible. When we finally decided to live together under the same roof, I thought we were ready to settle down. And yet, just a year later, this happened. The betrayal stung even deeper knowing it occurred after we'd made that commitment to each other. I had given her my trust, my time, and my energy. I never thought she would throw it all away like this. The one person I thought I could count on turned out to be the one who hurt me the most. If she was unhappy, she should have left. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how someone could do something like that to someone they claim to love. I hope we can both heal from this, but it's hard to imagine moving on. Absolutely. Yes, I hope, I echoed. She could put on a perfect front, all while lying right to my face. She was clearly running from something, maybe her own guilt, but she couldn't own up to the truth of what she'd done. To be honest, this kind of behavior likely wasn't new for her, and I probably never saw it coming. Update: she finally confessed something else to me, her desire to cheat on me. I needed to vent. A few weeks ago, after my partner admitted to her affair with another man, her words still haunted me. I asked why she had done it, why she had hurt me like this. Without hesitation, she responded, "I wanted to cheat on you, and I did it without mercy. What else do you want to know?" She added that after that night, she had followed up with other guys but that time had passed, and those hookups didn't mean anything. Later, she tried to retract that, saying the story about hooking up with other men wasn't true, that it had only been one affair. But how poisonous can someone be to openly confess to something like that just to hurt someone intentionally? Even if it was all a lie, why say it at all? Call me old-fashioned, but I don't think people should play games with confessions, especially not when they're false. Now I'm left wondering, did I ever truly know her? And do I even know her now? Here's a quick summary, swift in its execution: Kira and I don't communicate. I'm not on speaking terms with her at the moment. She told me this as she was preparing to leave and packing up her belongings. How harsh is that? Oh boy. I apologize to the original poster. I believe she is expressing such sentiments because she wants you to walk away and put an end to it. She has weaknesses. She doesn't want to accept responsibility. As I mentioned, a bridge is easier to damage and completely destroy, and that is to own up to your mistakes and extend forgiveness. She is aware of her shame as a human being. Update: a year without speaking to each other. Things improved. Progress extended. I've been successful in not giving my ex any life, and I haven't heard from her in precisely a year. Since dates have always held sentimental value for me, I can only assume that the milestone has a greater emotional resonance for me. Furthermore, I doubt she has thought about how long we were apart, given that I was the one who was duped and caught off guard in this whole situation. Furthermore, I seriously doubt that she views this as a turning point in her own life. However, I'm not sure, though. Some days, I still can't help it. I suppose it shouldn't matter to me what she is thinking. It takes a difficult, drawn-out process of reflection to go this far without talking about someone you genuinely loved and cared for. Furthermore, being deserted under the pretense of adultery and deceit is a different animal entirely. My former partner genuinely abandoned me after discovering her extramarital affair. In just 3 days after packing up everything she owned, she hurried back to her home state. After the inevitable fights and explosions, I left her in silence out of respect for my own sanity. I blocked her on all the platforms that were available: Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. I stopped chatting to her on WhatsApp, SoundCloud, Netflix, and even Venmo. I went a step further and cut off all other lines of communication, including those with her close friends and family. I wouldn't allow her or anyone connected to her the luxury of intruding into my life. By all means, get in touch if you need to, but only if there's a chance of reconciliation. There's a family or living situation that needs attention, or you and your ex got along well. If you were misled, deceived, abused, gaslight, or betrayed into thinking that their bad stay was your fault, forever no contact. Grieving happens in stages, as we all know, but a year later, I don't think they always manifest in that sequential manner. I still have days when I'm happy and days when I'm angry. Some days, I think I've come to terms with her being gone forever, and other days, I continue to live in denial. Some days, I wonder if she's thinking of me at all, let alone how she's feeling. Some days, I just sit here and wonder if she truly regrets leaving me. There's even a dark, morbid hope that, with me gone in her new life, she felt empty or like a piece of total crap. That's how she made me feel, after all. It's important to keep in mind that no interaction is personal. It's difficult to see yourself as a unique person after you split up with someone you can't fix. You're not dating. I've looked into a number of coping mechanisms for that new reality. I attempted counseling, although the sessions became stale. It did help. I dabbled in some binge drinking, misbehaving, and even haphazard Tinder hookups. None of that nonsense, will I promise you, helps you get over someone completely. You will always have some degree of love for someone. I've reached a point in my recovery where I understand that improving my relationship with myself is the only thing that counts. Acknowledging your shortcomings is also essential. I wasn't absolved of guilt or victimization, even though I was betrayed. I wasn't flawless either, and a number of my own shortcomings contributed to the breakdown of my previous relationship. In a relationship, communication is essential, and when it's lacking, it can quickly blow up in your face. I loved Kira, and I will always miss her, but I am unable to be there for her in person. I can say that things do get better. While they can be helpful, distractions are not the answer. Even though it sounds cliché, it simply takes time. Pay attention to your new life and yourself. Now, a community perspective, it's time to disregard this date, OP. You've done a great job of surviving her thus far. Although infidelity is inevitable, you still need to move forward and strive to reach the ultimate level. The nation of May needs to address its apathy. You have to let go of the last remnant of her that is inside your mind. That particular passage, I will always love her, and I still miss her. You let that portion go because it's so crucial to your future. It must be done on your behalf. For the sake of your future, you must act. In a year, you must be able to go through this day without giving it any thought. All you want is for Tuesday to arrive, not as good as next Tuesday but still better than the Tuesday before. However, it was just another Tuesday, unaware that this would be the special day. It's true what the comment says. Considering the cards you were dealt, you've done incredibly well. Breakups are more difficult than ending a relationship, especially when they happen amicably. Taking things day by day can sometimes be the best course of action. You're correct, when we do that, things improve, and a good day is any day we're not with an infidelity partner. I appreciate you listening to the stories of today. If you liked what you heard, kindly hit the like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Additionally, feel free to comment below with your thoughts on what transpired. Be careful.